After that massive detour last week into Japanese exclusive entries, this time we're back on terra firma with games that received official English releases. We're in the modern era, or the Sega era, but I can't really call it that as Sega didn't own Atlus quite the whole of this time. Anyway, we're basically going to split this into two halves. I'm going to call them Milking Persona 4 and Milking Persona 5, with Persona 5 separating the two halves. We begin this section with 2011's Catherine. Again, this one is debatably not part of the Mega 10 universe, but it had largely the same team as the Neo Persona games, and prominently features typical SMT chaos and lore themes, as well as many Easter eggs. The game itself is a story-heavy action puzzle game, and was created as a way for the Persona team to get used to working on 7th gen hardware before Persona 5, though Persona 5 ended up being released on both 7th and 8th gen consoles. This game stars Vincent, who had a cameo in Persona 3 Portable, and his two love interests, both called Catherine, but spelt differently, with K Catherine representing lore, and C Catherine representing chaos. There are 9 endings available in the game, 3 for each of chaos and lore, 2 for neutral, and then a bonus ending. The player's alignment depends on choices made throughout the game, and the specific ending they get depends on choices during the final level, and how well they match the player's current alignment. The next release in this era was Devil Survivor Overclocked, a remake of Devil Survivor 1 on the 3DS. This version featured an extra playable epilogue, an 8th day in addition to the base game's playable 7 days, and featured many major improvements from the DS version, including adding in voice acting for practically every line of dialogue. In fact, upon release, Atlus claimed this game featured the most voiced lines out of any game they've made. This playable 8th day is only available on certain routes of the base game, and also features multiple endings. Going by release order, what game comes next is debatable. Persona 4 Arena released in arcades in March 2012. This was a 2D fighting game developed by Arc Systems, in a similar vein to the BlazBlue games. At launch, it featured the 7 party members of the investigation team with combat personas, as well as Aegis, Akihiko and Mitsuru from Persona 3. In the lead up to the home console release, the arcade version was updated over time to add in original character Labris, Elizabeth from Persona 3, and Shadow Labris. This game released for Xbox 360 and PS3 in the summer of 2012 for Japan and America, but it was close to a year before the European version came out, which was a problem as this was one of the only free PS3 games to be region locked. The home console release features a story mode for each of the playable characters, bar Shadow Labris. These story modes are told through visual novel form, with small segments of fighting in between. And while they roughly tell the same story, they also seem to contradict each other. The plot itself is a sequel to the original Persona 4, set a few months later, and ends with a sequel hook for another game. Another bonus to this game's story mode is it gave a canon name to the Persona 4 main character of Yu Narukami, as used in the anime. Between the arcade and home releases of Persona 4 Arena, Persona 4 Golden was released for the PS Vita. This is an updated remake of Persona 4, featuring 2 new social links and a new dungeon, as well as many new events throughout the in-game year and an extra playable 3rd semester. Jumping around between the different branches in order to keep in release order, we're back on the 3DS with Devil Summoner Soul Hackers. This received a remake in 2012. Given that the original didn't release in the West, this was a lot of American and European players' first time playing the game. And as of writing, this closes off the Devil Summoner branch. Unlike Persona 4 Golden, the additions to this were much more minor. There were of course graphical updates, new demons and a bonus ultimate boss, but no new story content. However, this didn't really matter to us too much, as we didn't get the original game anyway. Then, after a decade-long gap between numbered titles, we finally had the next Shin Megami Tensei game. SMT4 for the 3DS was a rather traditional entry, with 4 endings, 3 based on alignments, the standard lore, neutral and chaos, and the white ending, which is sort of a bad ending from an in-game choice. As is common with many SMT games, this featured a lore hero, Jonathan, and a chaos hero, Walter. SMT4, despite being the first numbered entry on a portable console, was the first numbered entry with full voice acting. But considering what consoles 1 and 2 released on, this fact isn't actually that surprising. What I really don't like though is how this game never got a physical release in Europe, only digital, which is a problem given that the 3DS is region locked. SMT4 was also the first major Megatang release to feature significant DLC content. Some DLC was minor things such as equipment, but there were also some that featured additional side quests with story content. 2014, and we're back in the Persona branch. If I'm real here, we're mostly going to be chilling in this branch for the rest of this era. We have Persona Q for the 3DS, which is a crossover spin-off for Persona 3 and Persona 4. Set during both games due to time travel, and remaining canon to both games due to characters developing amnesia from the game's events. This game returns to the first-person dungeon crawling of Persona 1, and has a different battle system, where all moves are selected at the start of a turn, and landing a hit to a weak spot lets that party member have a zero-cost skill next turn. This game had two routes, which are near identical in gameplay, but differ in several story elements. One focuses more on the Persona 3 cast, and one more on the Persona 4 cast. Whichever route you pick, the protagonist of the other route will be a fully realised character, and not just a silent protagonist. Sticking with Persona, we have Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, which was released in arcades initially, before getting a home console release, just like its precursor. Before the arcade release of the game, in select locations, new fighters Junpei and Yukari were added to the original arcade game, and when the arcade release of Ultimax came out, new playable character Sho Minazuki was also added. In the home console release, in addition to these characters, Rise from Persona 4 was added as a playable fighter, and a duo character of Ken and Koromaru from Persona 3 were also added. This game received DLC in the form of Adachi, Marie, and Elizabeth. Margaret. I meant Margaret here, not Elizabeth. But I don't want to have to redo this whole section, so you're just going to have to put up with it. Unlike the previous game, this contained only two visual novel story modes, one for Persona 4, considered the canon one, and one for Persona 3. However, these story modes were a lot longer. The Adachi DLC came with a short Adachi story mode, which was basically a companion to the Persona 4 story mode. Yet another Persona game comes next, with Persona 4 Dancing All Night. This was a rhythm game for the PS Vita, and controlled, well, like a rhythm game for the PS Vita. It had a visual novel story mode, telling a story set after Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, starring the Persona 4 cast once again. However, Nanako was added as a playable character for the first time, as well as new character Kunami. DLC for Adachi and Marie was also available, plus Hatsune Miku as well. We temporarily move away from Persona, but we might as well be talking about a Persona game here. It's Tokyo Mirage Sessions, released in 2015 for the Wii U. This is a crossover between SMT and Fire Emblem, but it basically amounts to Persona with Fire Emblem heroes as personas. Oh, and the game's a musical with idols, so what's not to love? But for real, the gameplay of this game was pretty solid, and feels similar to that of Persona. Though there were some slightly odd censorship choices in the West for a game that was released subbed only. The game received DLC of extra costumes and extra dungeons. In Japan there was also a swimsuit DLC, which of course wasn't brought to the Western censored version. Devil Survivor 2 received a 3DS remake as well, called Devil Survivor 2 Record Breaker, or Break Record in Japan. It features similar upgrades to the Devil Survivor 1 remake, as well as an extra sequel campaign. This sequel doesn't directly follow from any of the original endings, instead following on from a timeline similar to one of the original endings, but with some elements taken from another ending. Record Breaker featured several DLC packs. The most interesting of these was a timed free DLC set of Durarara characters as party members. This is due to Devil Survivor and Durarara sharing a character designer. The final release in this half before Persona 5 is another mainline SMT game for 3DS. A sequel to Shin Megami Tensei 4, known as Shin Megami Tensei 4 Apocalypse, or Final in Japan. This sequel is a sort of sequel to the neutral ending of SMT4. Apocalypse starts before the end of the neutral route, and then diverges. The gameplay to this is very similar to its predecessor. This game has 4 endings, all of which determined by individual choices rather than alignment. The first 2 are lore and chaos endings, which are very similar to the original lore and chaos endings, while the 3rd and 4th endings are light and dark endings, which continue on significantly past the other endings. These are referred to as the Bonds and Massacre routes, or alternatively, the Peace and Anarchy routes. This game also featured DLC, some of which added additional story content, but the most standout of the DLCs would have to be the Messiahs in the Diamond Realm, which features the protagonists of every numbered SMT game having been summoned from their respective timelines. Before we move on to the final era, let's do a quick run through all the related media here. Catherine received 2 novels. The first, Catherine the Novel, is an adaptation of the game, however it added in its own extra content, as well as having an ending not featured in the original, a combination of chaos and neutral endings, and a prequel novel subtitled The Mysterious Tale of Rapunzel, featuring Catherine with a C before the events of the game. Persona 4 Arena featured a manga adaptation. This manga, interestingly, largely followed the Yosuke route, however it took elements from other routes, such as Aigis' route, but at the end of the day, Yosuke was the hero here. Persona 4 Arena also received a stage play adaptation, which broadly told its own version of events, but was closer to the Persona 4 protagonist Yu's version of events. The sequel to Arena, Ultimax, also received manga and live-action adaptations. The live-action play of Ultimax took an interesting choice by cutting the new Persona 3 cast members, Junpei, Yukari, Ken and Koromaru, which was probably largely due to that it followed the canon P4 route of that game, in which those characters have a relatively minor role. Persona 4 Golden received its own separate anime adaptation. This was half the length of the original anime and was mostly lighter in tone, only covering the new content and skipping over a lot of the original anime plot. It added plenty of new scenes for Marie that weren't featured in the game, however towards the climax it had a remake of the final battles. The anime itself received 2 drama CDs. SMT4 led to 2 manga. The first, SMT4 Demonic Gene, stars the Chaos hero Walter in an alternate timeline where the protagonist of SMT4 doesn't exist. The second is another alternate story, but instead starring Jonathan, the law hero. Persona Q received 3 manga adaptations, Roundabout, which was a comedic anthology, and 2 separate adaptations of the game, one for the Persona 3 route and one for the Persona 4 route. The Persona 3 adaptation finishes halfway into the plot, while the Persona 4 one covers the full game. As with last time, while checking over this in the editing room, I found anthology manga for Persona 4 Arena, Persona Q, and SMT4, so let's add them in. Don't click off just yet, I've got a few very important things to say, and I don't want to see any comments saying, "When's part 7 coming?" Firstly, since last week's video, I've over doubled my sub count and I'm so thankful to each and every one of you who subbed, especially LaRue for sending most of you my way. Secondly, the next part, part 7, was going to be the end of this, but hopefully I can follow that up with an 8th part covering all the stuff I've missed. However, it might be a slight bit longer to wait before part 7 comes out. I've got a script written and even filmed some of it, but I want to make sure it's as good as I can possibly get it, and ideally timing it closer to P5S's English release would probably help with the YouTube algorithm. In the meantime though, I've still got a few other videos planned, this time more like video essays, some Mega 10, some not. They've been in the works from before I started up this channel, but I think I can finally do them justice now. Thank you so much for getting to the end of this long message. If you're not subbed, consider doing so. If you are, hit the bell for notifications. I'm a small new creator here, so every minute of watch time or subscriber really does mean the world to me. As always, stay safe, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.